Good afternoon, esteemed viewers. Today we bring you an engaging and thought-provoking interview. In this conversation, Professor Kishore Mahbubani delves into why China is on track to outpace the United States in the global economic and political spheres. He highlights a series of strategic and structural factors, arguing that China's rise is inevitable and that it will ultimately emerge as the dominant global power, eclipsing the US in the long term.
And the Chinese Communist Party is succeeding because while in theory it is still a communist party, it is a communist party that is the exact opposite of the Soviet Communist Party, because the Soviet Communist Party was run by old apparatchiks. The Chinese Communist Party may possibly be the most meritocratic political party in the world. And the selection process results in the best minds running China today. You met some of them.
Experienced.
You know
Yes.
Wang Qishan. You know how brilliant these people are.
Yeah.
Right? So by going into this old ideological reflex and saying, hey, democracies can always overcome communist parties, the United States hasn't done a deeper analysis and realized that this is not a contest between a democracy and a communist party system. It's a contest between a plutocracy and a meritocracy.
You talked about it being a party of representation, how that is maintained, whether that is stable. It is still true for the last 30 years.
Yes,
Yeah.
you see, at the end of the day, running China, keeping a country of 1.4 billion together every day is a massive challenge, which is why for most of Chinese history, China has more often been divided than united. So the periods like what China has experienced in the last 30 years with a strong central government delivering phenomenal improvement in living standards to its people, is very rare in Chinese history.
Yes.
And so if you compare the record in governance of the Chinese Communist Party, especially after Deng Xiaoping launched his 4 modernizations 40 years ago in 1979, it's quite amazing what China has accomplished. And the Chinese must always measure the record of their governance, not against what other countries have achieved, but what has been achieved in Chinese history. And no Chinese government ever in Chinese history has improved the living standards of the Chinese people as much as the Chinese Communist Party has. And you're right, I call it the Chinese Civilization Party, because the main goal of the Chinese Communist Party is not to promote or to export communist ideology. The main goal of the Chinese Communist Party is to revive Chinese civilization and bring it back to the standing and respect that it used to enjoy in the world for over 2,000 years. And the key driving force in the Chinese mind, which I think every American should be aware of, is that the Chinese are acutely aware that they went through something like maybe 150 years of national humiliation, starting from the Opium War of 1842, probably going up to the Japanese occupation and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So they've gone through a lot of humiliation, and their desire, therefore, is to regain the respect that China used to enjoy. And it is somewhat sad that just at the moment when the Chinese people feel that, hey, we are now finally achieving something meaningful, that's the time when America decides to slap China. And so for them, the only thing they remember is, you see, they're trying to humiliate us again.
And the scar tissue in the United States echoes of the Cold War vis-a-vis the USSR.
That's right.
And in your book, you do a very nice job of showing why the Chinese challenge is very different than the Soviet challenge in terms of weaponization and arms race, in terms of ideology. There are just many aspects that you
Yeah.
disaggregate.
Yeah. Well, I think, the reason why I encourage Americans to think deeper is that if they look very carefully at the track record of what China is doing and what the Soviet Union is doing, right? It is actually quite shocking that in the geopolitical contest today between China and United States, instead of China behaving like the Soviet Union, it is the United States that's behaving like the Soviet Union. Because I explain in the book in one chapter, I ask, can America make U-turns? So for example, the contest between the United States and China will not take place in the military sphere. It will be in a nuclear war between the United States and China. There will not be a winner and a loser, there will be a loser and loser. So logically, it should be in the interest of the United States, therefore, to reduce its defense budget and take the money and invest in R&D, because that's where the real contest is. But the United States cannot reduce its defense budget, because no matter how brilliant a defense secretary you have, whether it's Ash Carter or General Mattis, because the process of deciding where to spend money is locked in by the US Congress, and allocations are made to each constituency by the congressman, and therefore the defense budget is large, irrational, and unnecessary. And if the United States was serious about taking on China, it should cut its defense budget into half, but that's impossible. And in that, so it's like the old Soviet Union that also couldn't cut its defense budget into half.
Strangled itself.
Yeah. So in that sense, the United States hasn't thought very hard and very deep about how different this contest with China is. Whereas by contrast, the Chinese are quite happy. They're growing their defense budget, but at a fixed percentage of their GNP and not increasing it. And the Chinese are very happy that America has 13 aircraft carrier fleets, because each aircraft carrier fleet is draining millions of dollars away from the US Treasury every day. And paradoxically, in military terms, an aircraft carrier today is a sitting duck. And as an American professor, Tim Colton of Harvard told me, it just takes a $100,000 hypersonic missile to bring down a $1 billion aircraft carrier. So it doesn't make sense anymore. So clearly you need to have a fundamental strategic reboot in American thinking. And in that sense, I'm trying to be helpful to America and say, think very hard about what are the big changes you need to make.
One of the things that haunt people who are talking about, quote, new economic thinking and technology is the interface between this rivalry between the US and China, digital commerce platforms, and cybersecurity. And the story goes, these are my friends at MIT again talking, that if you set up a digital platform, it aggregates a lot of information. Hackers are able to use virtual private networks and disguise their identity and their whereabouts. So a hacker can be in Saskatchewan in Canada, hypothetically, pretend to be New York attacking Shanghai, or be in Armenia pretending to be Beijing attacking Washington, D.C.
That's right.
I've talked to leaders in both countries, very high leaders. They recognize that given all the other tensions and rivalry and scar tissue from history and potential for misunderstanding, that they do not have a way to verify. Let's say you make an agreement, we both pledge our trust to abide by the cooperative behavior. With the success and the presence of disguised hackers, you can't verify whether that's the case. And people are struggling now to try to figure out how to overcome this, because if you balkanize the internet and the trading systems, you're accelerating that polarization into competing
Yeah.
systems? And
No,
I don't know how to answer that, but I think
Yeah.
it's a fantastic
Yeah.
question to be explored.
It is, you're absolutely right. And this is where one of my key recommendations in the book is that if you want to find solutions, there will be, of course, many challenges in the relations between the United States and China, not just in cyber security, it will be in law of the sea, maritime areas, and many, many other areas. The best solution is to look for multilateral solutions. And in the area of cyber security and cyber warfare, it's good to agree on one common set of rules. So I'll give you a simple example. You know, nowadays, with a good hacker can, in theory, unleash the waters of a dam, right? And then can you imagine the thousands of people who will die
And flooded up.
when the dams suddenly burst, right? So why not agree on one set of multilateral set of rules? At least agree on the rules first. Of course, implementing it, you're right, would be a challenge, but agree. We will never attack a dam. We will never attack a hospital.
Yes.
We will never paralyze the electricity of a city. We will never sort of thing. So you have at least common sets of areas where you agree, right? And of course, frankly, it will make perfect sense for an American military to hack into a Chinese destroyer. Of course, that's fair game, right? And then vice versa too. So that's fair game. But let's make sure you carve out areas and we say, in these areas you don't do anything. But of course, the interesting exception to all this, and as you know, since you're a monetary person, I point out that the real Achilles heel of the United States is the fact that the US dollar is the global reserve currency. And that, as you know, as the French then Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing said, it's an exorbitant privilege. It enables Americans to live beyond their means. So it's in America's national interest to preserve the US dollar as the global reserve currency. But by weaponizing it, the United States has created incentives for countries to move away
they're
from the
inducing
US
innovation.
dollar.
Yeah.
And it is conceivable for China to use blockchain technology to create not necessarily a new monetary system, but just a platform that enables countries to trade with each other without having to use the US dollar.
Yes.
And the minute the US dollar is no longer the dominant currency in global trade, it can still, of course, remain strong in the financial spheres. But once that critical part of the system, where it's no longer essential for global trade, disappears, the US dollar becomes vulnerable. And if it is no longer a global reserve currency, then American standards of living will go down. And that's another example of where it is in the interest of the United States and China to work together.